Hi everyone, it's Amanda here, and welcome back to Resilience in the Sea. I'm so excited to introduce our special guest, Ian Snape, who is the co-author of the book Resilience by Design that we introduced you to on day one and have referred to many times through the last 5 days. And Ian is the CEO of a company called Frontline Mind. They deal with resilience, recovery, and leadership. But I think it's best that, Ian, how about you introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and what you do and what led you to where you are now.
Okay, I'm Ian. As Amanda's just said, I run a small company called Frontline Mind. And we came at this idea of frontline and this concept of mind maybe 6-7 years ago, when I realized that most of the clients that we were particularly passionate about working with were frontline people. We were coaching with correctional officers, with police, with health, doctors, nurses, people working in extreme environments, and helping them recover from some of the challenges that they'd had to deal with. And we did a lot of work with vicarious trauma. We worked with people who perhaps had lost their way or were burnt out. And it got us working across a whole system of people and teams and then whole organizations. So that's kind of where we came from. And then I think what led me to there was a confluence of two career paths. One as a researcher, leading expeditions mainly in Antarctica, and then the other one as an athlete, working in or really enjoying sort of extreme sports, from skiing and scuba diving under ice and martial arts and all sorts of things. And that all came together into coaching around about 10-12 years ago. So that's a little bit about me and who I work with and where I sort of came from.
Fantastic. And I'd just like to add, in some of the research I did, snooping into your life, I also believe you're quite a competitive sailor.
Competitive. I like that word. I like to have a go. I wouldn't say I'm any good. But Gary and I bought a yacht about 5 or 6 years ago, and we neither of us really sailed. And we said, let's do this because it's so complex and so difficult, and it's infinitely difficult to learn. So we jumped in and had a go, and then I really found I loved racing. And I got more and more passionate about racing. So that's sort of the idea that we'd be cruising and doing all these other things sort of went out the window. So I've got bitten by that bug. And I've recently sold a yacht, which has made my wife very, very happy. But I'm looking to buy another one. So she's less keen about that.
Look out, you're going to be floored with super yacht sales and opportunities by the time we finish this conversation. So let's talk about the book you've written, Resilience by Design. I came across that only a few months ago, and it was the answer to my dreams. I think I'd done every resilience course available online and in person. I believe it's one of the most important things everyone needs to eat, sleep, and breathe and practice every day. However, I do find that, if you haven't been introduced to the concept of resilience, a lot of times people think of it as fitness training. How did that come about? And can you talk about how this book came about and why it's become such a labor of love of yours?
Yeah, well, that idea that resilience is about fitness programs, or it's about being able to suffer on no matter how bad the situation gets. I think when Mike and I started working together and we started talking about the book, we really wanted to dispel that myth. I had a conversation online recently with somebody who was they'd failed a PhD and they'd quit. And they described the environment as toxic. It was unrewarding. They had no supports. And, for me, that's a resilient strategy, to put your hand up and say, hey, this is not the right choice for me. I've gone down the wrong direction. I've made a poor choice, and now I'm going to reverse my decision. That's resilience. Resilience is about great decision-making in really tough circumstances. Sometimes it's about every single option is bad, which is the least bad option that I can take. and knowing how to make those sorts of decisions, that's resilience. So there's so many different facets to it and different ways that people do it. And I started modeling initially mountain guides, and then the decision-making processes of frontline specialists. So tactical police, military, frontline workers in health, you know, all sorts of people, and worked out how do they do resilience. And to do that, we asked structured interview questions. It comes from a modality called clean language. And the question is, when you're resilient at your best, that's like what? And it invites metaphor. And then after asking this question hundreds and hundreds of times, we noticed the patterns that emerged of what people do who operate in those frontline environments, or those really, really challenging high-risk occupations. And from there, we could say that we designed our course based upon the natural ways that people do resilience. And some people do one or two things. Occasionally you get people that do quite a few, but most people have at least one or two go-tos. And then our training is about learning from each other, learning from what people do. And I guess the book was an opportunity to bring together the practitioner-led understanding that we had, and then marry that with what does science say? What does the academic, the published peer-reviewed literature say about resilience and about all of the things that we found? So you'll see in the book there's like nearly 500 references. It's really tightly pulled together, but I will say that the 12 chapters represent in one way or another the top things that people do in really high pressure occupations. So that was our first motivation. Second motivation for the book was really enjoying the work of the people that have been working on business model canvas and value proposition design. So these super accessible books, you open them up and you go, wow, this is just really easy to read. I can read just this page, or I can start from front to back, or I can just go to a chapter, and I can use it like a coffee table book. I can dip in and out, or if I've got a particular challenge, I can look up and go, oh, what does it say about rest? Or what's this thing about flow? Or what do I do about stress? And you can open it up, dip in, spend 10 minutes. And if you're like me, you've got an attention span that's, that big, and you can put it down and go and do something else. So that was our motivation. We wanted a really engaging book. And it certainly required an enormous amount of resilience from us and our poor graphic designer, who had to go round and round in circles every time we said, oh no, we want this to fit on, it has to be a single spread to tell this story, or whatever challenges we set for her. So yeah, that was the design of the book.
And so that course has led on to a course, and a course that we're going to be running together to adapt to the maritime and particularly the super yacht world. And Tilde, who are the main people you've been running these courses for? What are the groups?
So we have a range of ways that we train, and it really depends upon our client base. Sometimes it's face-to-face intensive workshops. Sometimes it's blended delivery, where we might have some face-to-face and then some online. Sometimes it's just online with virtual workshops, or self-directed learning. So we will customize to however the client needs it. And then our clients, we've done a lot of work with correctional officers, doctors, nurses. We've trained quite a few psychologists. We do a lot of work in the child protection space, in a really, really tough job, dealing with child abuse and domestic violence. We work with police. We've done a little bit of work with the military. We work with other sort of, I'm going to call them more regular organizations, though they're not, we generally don't go out looking for work in that space, but they'll come to us if they've heard of what we do. And, they might have problems with staff leaving, or stress, or there could be a big incident that's happened. It could be a bank, for example, and they've had all their systems go down, and there's lots of stress and people freaking out. They might call us and said, hey, things aren't going so well. What do we do? And then we jump in and lend a hand.
So we live in a world where many years ago, we all just wanted to go to sea, and we were basically the yachty version of beach bums. No offense to anyone watching, but that's how it was in the late 80s and early 90s when my generation started yachting. Then we started going into, high performance sailing. At that time, the boats were basically the yachting industry was anything from a 50-foot carbon boat to a 70-foot motorboat. But now the industry is very split. We've got high performance sailing, such as the ocean race in the America's Cup, where we've got foils, we've got boats like the Imocas going down into the Southern Ocean for the first time foiling, using high performance technology with massive loads that we've never seen before. The America's Cup, that's at the most elite point of yachting. Then we've got the high performance sailing boats, which have huge loads. They're requiring a lot more crew than ever before, some crew who've never been to sea. We are going further than ever before. A lot of crew are spending a lot of time away from home. And we're in situations where when you're on, it's on. And sometimes it's very hard to get rest. We have, a lot of people think we might be just, like the Instagram profiles, sitting around and beaches like Nikki Beach drinking cocktails, but it involves huge work hours, a lot of stress. You could think that you're about to finish a trip and then suddenly find out you're being redirected and won't get home to your family for another 3 months. We've got a lot of men and women, just like the military, that are away from home for huge periods of time, plus the families that are living at home without their loved ones. And then the relentless demands of owners, who we love all of you, however, that one day in the Caribbean and then decide to go to Antarctica, and then the boat breaks and we've got to make it look like the boat never breaks. It's always absolutely perfect. So there's massive highs and massive lows, but there's an increasing amount of stress, especially with the growing crew numbers too. One of the biggest problems in yachting at the moment that is no secret anymore is mental health and stress. So how do you think that the course we're forming, based on resilience by design and the work you've done at Frontline, how do you think that could help the mariners and the super yacht crew that we're talking to today?
Yeah, wow, it's such a broad industry with so many varied pressures. I'll go to some of the fundamentals that I think will really help everyone. When I started coaching, I always envisioned that I would be working with executives. And then I got a few clients referred to me who were long-term off work with workers' compensation and with illness, and mainly from trauma. And I hadn't really done much work with trauma at that point.
I'm so sorry. Sorry, my phone just rang. I'll edit that out.
Cool. When we think about the industry as a whole, it's so varied, all the challenges, all the different pressures that people have to face. And for me, it comes back to some of the fundamentals and then building on those fundamentals. And it takes me back to some of my very first clients. I always thought that I'd be coaching executive coaching in business. And fairly early on, I got referred some clients that were traumatized and they wanted to get back to work, and they'd been off work for a long time. Excuse me. And dealing with somebody who's in a really, really unwell state, I remember thinking, okay, I've not done this before. I'm going to treat them just like I would an Olympic athlete. I'd coached some Olympic athletes at that point, and I just treated these people like they were Olympic athletes, but they weren't on yet their A game right now. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say that I ignored the problem, but I bypassed the problem and went straight to the outcome. The outcome was they need to know how to think. They need to know how to use their bodies to make sense of the world. They needed to reprocess some of their experiences, some of their memories. So I just taught them how to be high performers again. And once they knew how to be high performers, they didn't have trauma anymore. They didn't have anxiety. They didn't have hypervigilance. So when I'm coming in with people who are traumatized, when they've had a really bad time, they might have smashed something, they might have lost a major race, they've blown it in the Olympics. you want to get them back on the path to high performance, they need to know the high performance code, if you like. How do they do high performance? So some of these fundamentals, they apply to anybody, anywhere. Rest, access to flow state, self-awareness, what's going on in your body as you're thinking. You're thinking in your body together, thinking how that all works and comes together. Your sense making, your filters, the patterns that you see and the patterns that you're a part of, and becoming aware of your dynamics with other people. So these fundamentals apply to the America's Cup team, and they apply to high performance teams with challenging owners who are on a trip to Antarctica that they hadn't planned for. You know, if you can communicate and you can get some of the fundamentals of teamwork happening and you're self-aware and you know what's going on for you, if you can recognize the earliest signs of stress and you go, hang on, I've got a signal here. What's this for? If you can recognize, oh, hang on a minute, I've got a bit of fear going on here, and you can dial it up and dial it down, you might keep it. You might go, this fear is actually really useful to me right now. It's going to give me a bit of an edge. It's going to keep me alert, because if I stuff this up, I'm going to die. So working with your emotions, working with the sensations in the body, they apply to America's Cup, they apply to high performance teams, they apply to conflict. So building up from those foundations in resilience by design, I think, is where we'll begin. We'll customize for the offshore and extreme medicine. And then I think we need to go into the recovery space a bit. I think we need to think about when things go wrong. How do we as a team, how do we as individuals respond when somebody's just been crushed, or they've lost a limb, or somebody's died, or we've lost a client? Okay, it's not okay to just go, oh, well, hang on a minute, that's just a bit of a disaster, isn't it? You're still out there, you're in the middle of nowhere. You could be days or weeks away from getting this sorted. So you've got to know what you're doing. You've got to keep a team together. You might need to keep a patient, you know, in a really positive attitude and alive and breathing, keep their attention going whilst you're doing the medical things. And you could be doing some really quite deep coaching work for quite a protracted period of time. Or, of course, we could be looking to keep people in the field. Excuse me. We could be looking to keep people on an expedition. And if we can keep them there and keep them having fun rather than having to go to medical, you know, that more definitive care into a hospital, then they might finish the trip of a lifetime. You might not have to have a multi-million-dollar turnaround. If we can just get somebody we know, hey, they're having a bit of a mental health episode, what can we do as coaches to get them back on track? How can we redirect their attention? Maybe they're anxious. You know, what's a fast hack for anxiety that you can do as a coach when you're on a boat in the middle of nowhere and suddenly somebody's starting to freak out? You know, those are the sorts of practical things we need to cover on this course.
So important. And another one is a hot topic in the industry at the moment that I'm seeing a lot of talk about is crew retention. Because once again, as the boats get bigger and people realize that it's not all fun and games, the crew retention that is a big problem. So you've obviously worked with other organisations on being able to retain their teams and their crew. Do you think working in resilience would help people be able to retain their teams and their crew?
Yeah, I'm working on this with a number of agencies at the moment, particularly in healthcare.
Yeah.
You know, there's projected to be, I think it's something like a 20 to 30% shortfall in nurses in the next 10 years. So when you start working on the front line of those agencies, retention is the number one risk and opportunity in their business. Recruitment is around the number 2 or number 3 mark. So working on resilience for me has 2 parts to it for this idea of retention. The first is knowing how to handle the pressures that come your way. Make good decisions, keep on top of your health, recognize the early signs of burnout or tiredness or fatigue or anxiety or whatever it might be. But there's another part to this, and that's creating an environment where people can survive, where it's a healthy working environment, where it's a fun place to be. Now, a lot of that requires great leadership. It requires you to go, hang on a minute, I need to talk to my people here. This is not you can't go back to 1980 and do this top-down command and control, shout at everybody, and the louder I shout, the better the result. It just doesn't work that way, not in 2023. Contemporary leadership is about working with your people so everybody can operate sustainably and have a good time. And sometimes, even if it's really tough, being able to work together from top to bottom is the thing that will get everyone through. And they go, geez, that was really, really tough. But you know what? We pulled together so well. It was a great experience. So that's resilience. It's not about just putting up with any amount of nonsense. I think if you want to retain good crew into the future, you'll need to treat them well. And the resilient ones that you treat well will stay with you. And I think the fragile ones that you don't invest in their training, or you just treat them poorly, they'll go somewhere else or they'll do something different. So I think in a competitive world right now, I think resilience is fundamental to train your staff, and most importantly, to train your managers and your leaders. What's reasonable? What can people do? What kind of challenges can we push to? And if we're going to push people absolutely to the limit, your America's Cup performers, then we need to be really careful. Where exactly is that limit? You don't want to break these people. These people are worth millions of dollars of investment, right? Take them to the limit, but don't bust them. Don't break them. Focus on getting the team absolutely to that limit. But you really need to work very carefully the closer you get to that, because of course, the more fragile it goes. It's the same for the yacht. You can take the yacht to the nth degree, but if the keel falls off, it's not going to get through the race, right? Your tolerances have to be so tight. And so it is with your crew. You can't just hope that they're going to sort this stuff out and be mentally on top of their game. It's not going to happen. You need to be very deliberate about every single member of an elite crew. How do they operate in high performance, and how do they work as a team in high performance? And it's no different to the engineering of your craft, except it's maybe a little bit tougher because people are pretty funky and they're less predictable than engineering.
Yeah, engines don't answer back. They can just stop if they're tired.
That's right.
On that note, you've mentioned rest a few times, and I'm definitely from an era and an industry or two with nursing, medicine, and professional sailing, where we've definitely come from an era where you will sleep when you die. And while the commercial vessels have, scheduled rest periods that they must adhere to, it can be quite hard to take that rest. And I'm sure sometimes you pretend you're resting in your cabin while you're doing your accounts or planning the next voyage or doing your passage plan. Can we talk a little bit about rest and why you've mentioned that as being something so important?
I've coached quite a few Olympic athletes, and you never, ever have to coach an Olympic athlete to try harder.
Mm-hmm.
They are so self-motivated, it's not funny. You do have to coach them to rest, pay attention to their body signals. You sometimes need to keep them onto their nutrition or their discipline. Rest for frontline workers is no different. They'll go so hard that they'll burn out, they'll blow up to keep people alive, to get the mission done, whatever it might be. So when people are pushing so hard, it's not enough to just say, oh, you need 8 hours sleep, because you just might not ever happen. It's just not functional. But then you've got to go, well, okay, if I can't do that, well, what can I do? And there are all sorts of things to do in that space. For example, polyphasic sleeping. Polyphasic sleeping means lots and lots of small sleep cycles. You might not sleep for more than 2 hours, but you're doing it in a particular disciplined way. And that means that you might survive on a lot less sleep overall. You might sleep for 20-minute cycles and then build them up and accumulate them. It depends upon what you're trying to do. So at another extreme, there's the power napping. For me, I'm kind of okay at a range of things. I'm an okay martial artist. I've been doing it forever, but I'm not spectacular. I can sail a boat, I can race, I can have fun, but I'm not great. I can do all sorts of things, but I'm not great. But there's one thing, if it was an Olympic sport, I would represent Australia, and that's power napping. I could curl up on the concrete right here and go, okay, I'm going to be asleep in 30 seconds. I'll set an alarm and I will be awake again in 22 minutes. Hit the button and I'm gone. So if there's one skill I recommend everybody trains for the Olympics in, it's power napping, right? The ability to just go, okay, I've only got 20 minutes, but I need to be out so deep, and then back up and ready to go again. Even smaller than that, if you've got really intense periods of work, maybe it's only a minute. Maybe you're looking for just the moments where you can stop, shake your shoulders out, have a brief relax, just breathe differently and go, okay, I've only got a minute in here. So what we're looking for are opportunities to rest that might be seconds, minutes, 20 minutes, maybe 90 minutes in a 90-minute rest cycle, maybe a combination of 90 minutes. Maybe you have a couple of days when you can really put it back in the bank and you put, some really long sleeps in. And then plan the sustainability cycle, which is like, okay, I've been on for this for 3 weeks now, 4 weeks, whatever it is. And then I'm going to have some downtime and I'm really going to catch up and rest. So it's on lots and lots of different time frames to think about rest, sleep, and how you're going to do it. Big dangers, screen time when you should be resting. You think you're resting, but actually you're not. You're stimulating. You're on TV. You're doing 15 different things. You're just not going, hey, I don't need any of this stuff. This is my chance. I'm going to put it in the bank. Military do this. You see them sleeping on their rucksacks. They're about to be deployed. Bang, they're all that cold.
Yeah.
They get in, they put it in the bank because they know they're going to be smashed anytime soon. All of these strategies need to be worked in with this. Some of these high performance jobs, or whether there's a tendency that you overwork and you keep going and you don't get as much rest as you need.
Brilliant. And that is so apparent and needed for the yachting industry, where so many of us, especially on deliveries, are not on a 24-hour clock. We're on a watch system, as you well know, and it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours on, 5 hours off, and it can become quite exhausting, especially when the leaders feel that they, in dangerous situations, that they can't take rest and they need to stay. I've done Sydney Hobarts where the tactician and the captain and the skipper will stay up for the whole 48 hours of the race because they don't think that the boat will survive if they even take a 5-minute nap. So I think that would be huge.
Yeah, for me personally, when I'm yacht racing, I like to ensure if it's a 3-day race or 4-day race, I like to make sure that the crew have got what are called R90 rest cycles of 90 minutes.
Yep.
I don't like to go more than that unless it's a double 90-minute block, but 90 minutes is about right. And we cycle through, and you get as many of those as you can do with your watch system. If I'm the skipper and I've got that there's too much going on here, I'm not going to go down and take my 90 minutes. I'll sleep on the deck. I'll be tied on. I'll be on a tether. It could be at night. The waves can be coming over, but I'll lie on the deck and I'll have my watch and I'll say to somebody, hey, I'm going down now. I'll be 20 minutes. Wake me in 20. I'm still on deck. I'm still on all my waterproofs, but I'm going to get my 20 minutes because my decision-making is going to be so much better after a 20-minute sleep.
That's very powerful and something that I hope you all take on. Now, another thing you speak about a lot, and I know you're a huge fan of it, is you've mentioned today the flow state. Now, I believe until now, a lot of people think the flow state is when you jump out of a plane and you're absolutely terrified, and then the fear sort of disappears and you're just flying through the air. Many of us have experienced it skiing down, the perfect mountain full of powder, and the fear you get just before you jump off the top of Montfort, and then you get in the zone. But we can't, it's not like we're doing extremes, and unless we're really fortunate, we're not doing these activities every day. But you seem to refer to being able to get into the flow state in everyday life. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. The conditions you describe, and there's a complicated term for it, but it becomes self-reinforcing. If you recreate in those environments, you generally need flow to survive them. But it becomes self-fulfilling. People go into those sports to get that experience of flow. Flow is actually the end game, not the mechanism to get there. We talk about flow junkies. I am hands down a flow junkie.
Yeah.
Right. Throughout my life, if you look at the things that I love to do, it's about flow, and it's about the state is really almost like a religious or a spiritual experience, and that is what people do in extreme meditation. They get to a point where there's no nothing, there's no internal self-talk, there's no one home, and you're just at one, you're at peace, and that's what people get from flow. Now, you can get there in extreme sports, which I love, or you can access it in everyday life to some extent. You can play games that induce flow. We have flow state games that we describe in our book, or some people access it in all sorts of different ways. I know people that get flow when they're gardening. They go into the garden, they become so immersed and so fascinated with the gardening and being in that environment. Time flies by, and it's the end of the day, and their partner's calling them back in saying, come on, you've been out there all day. And they've gone, and they look up and around, and suddenly they're back with us. And they're in this deep immersive state of flow. Now, I don't get flow when it's gardening. Gardening for me is it's where I go to die. I hate gardening with a passion. Oh, my word. And in fact, I've got somebody out there who's doing my gardening for me right now, and I'm so appreciative of that because it's not me. I get no flow from that. But whatever it is that floats your boat, literally, if it's sailing, and I love sailing because I get in flow. When I'm on the helm, I might have 2 hours there and I'm 100% in flow. And then I'm starting to get tired. Somebody else comes in and boom, they're on. You know, I know that different helms like different sorts of conditions, and they're good in different things. For me, flow junkie, you know, bombing downwind, on the edge, the thing's on its ear, and you're 100% keeping it up. And if you broach, it's all really, really bad. That's me. I'm the flow junkie, right, on the crew, and everyone's going, oh God, I hope he doesn't blow it, you know, that sort of thing. So lots of different ways you can access flow. And when I'm training elite athletes, often what I'll do is I'll train them to self-calibrate their flow state, know how to switch it on instantly. So before the competition starts, before they get the need for it, they need to be in it, and then stabilize it. You want stable flow through the competition. You don't want it bopping in and out, and you 1 minute you're thinking about, oh, did I pay my bills, and what are my kids doing, what's for dinner? That ain't flow. You're dropping in and out. You need stability through the flow, through peak performance, and then afterwards you need the recovery cycle and all those other things. So I hope that's answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely has. And I also can see the relevance here for doing the Resilience by Design course for another thing that's very trendy at the moment on social media. And I don't mean that in a derogatory term. There's so many people suffering from ADD, attention deficit disorder. And it feels to me like through this conversation that this work would really help people maintain that focus and stability that they need to get the job done.
Yeah. So this term, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder,
yeah,
I would absolutely meet any contemporary definition of it. If you look at the pattern of my behaviors and you look at the pattern of my eldest child, you look at what he does. You know, he's dropped his shoes over here, his clothes over there, his bag's over here. And you say, can you put your shoes on? He goes, yeah. And he starts towards his shoes. And before you know it, he's sat down reading a book, right? Now, I've got a couple of comments on it. The first is a lot of the people I know that I'm working with ADHD, they've actually got hyper focus. They've got real hyper focus on the things they're passionate about. If they're interested in it, good luck getting them to put their socks on, like my son, right? So my problem is hyper focus, not an inability to. We don't focus on folding the laundry. We don't focus on the routine. But if you're passionate, then you'll enter flow, and flow can help train you. Now, some of these resilience skills and the self-calibration, and you can, there's hacks that allow me to do my accounting. Now, I joke with my accountant that, oh, here we go. I might jab myself in the eye with my pencil to keep awake because I need something, some stimulation. So for me, I have to wait until the last possible minute, literally the last possible minute. And then I'll treat it like an Olympic sport where I'm trying to do my account so fast and so efficiently that I can hit the button and get the whole job done so quickly. And I think, excuse me, for anybody out there who thinks, oh, you know, I really struggle and I've got this ADHD thing, just check that in fact it isn't a superpower. And what I mean by a superpower, it's the thing that's keeping you fascinated, passionate about what you love. And if you can't do the things that other people would like you to do, like stack the dishes in an orderly manner, and my wife is that, you know, there's that meme. There are two types of people in a marriage. There's those that stack the dishwasher like a Swedish architect who works for IKEA. And then there's the mongoose on methamphetamine. I'm the mongoose. My wife's a Swedish architect. And I've got a superpower. It's spent yacht racing and doing flow junkie sports and playing with my kids. So I don't know if that helps you.
It really does. And one last question I've got for you is a couple of conversations I've had recently, one with a high performance coach, one with a super yacht captain that has done about 13 circumnavigations and all the high performance races and is, you know, running huge crews, and also a Navy SEAL. And when I told them about what we were doing, they said, yeah, I don't really need that because I think I learned enough resilience building my business, sailing these yachts or in my Navy SEAL training. What would your answer be to that?
Well, I've written the textbook on it and I'm still learning.
There you go.
And I'm learning from really unusual people in unusual places. You know, spend some time with a single parent who's looking after a disabled child.
Yeah.
If you can't learn some resilience from somebody like that, your mind's closed, right? Yeah. And I literally had a conversation recently with somebody and I went, wow, that's next level resilience there. Some of the things that they were doing was just amazing. So my answer would be yes, remain curious. And the other would be jump on a course anyway, because the people around you might learn from you. You might learn something, and if you don't, that's fine. Maybe you pass along some of the things that you've learned, you know, whether it's from Navy SEALs, whether it's from 16 navigations, jump on a course, share some stuff. You might learn something, and if not, well, at least you're a teacher and a coach. So
brilliant. And my last thing is let's say I'm putting together a crew to head down to Antarctica, and we're going to be circumnavigating, but with a main proportion of the time in Antarctica. We're going to be doing cold water diving. We're going to be climbing. We're going to be doing some pretty extreme sports, and we definitely want to retain the same crew for the whole trip because it's going to be pretty hard replacing someone from the other side of the world. So if you had 4 days to train us up, or you and I had 4 days to train the crew up, what would we focus on?
Getting me a ticket to join you. That sounds like my dream trip. I'll just come along.
We'll just do it on the trip. But what would we do?
Do it on the trip. We'll do it in real time. That just sounds my scuba diving under ice climbing, skiing around Antarctica, a bit of sailing. Sounds magnificent. Count me in. More seriously, I think the most important thing would be to get the crew together to work out the dynamics of how they're going to support each other.
Yeah.
There's the individual resilience and how we all do it, and knowing that really helps us look after each other. That's key. So that can happen quite quickly. That's a day. And then unpacking some of the specific strategies. And then I would spend some time preparing for the worst case scenario. I would spend some time preparing for recovery. If somebody loses a limb, they get a crush injury that's pretty bad. They get a bad knock to the head, or we lose somebody. Something, you know, a really significant or critical incident. Let's prepare ahead of time for what we're going to do as a team, how we're individually going to keep it together, and what we're going to do when we get home. All of that stuff is far better to do before you get there than trying to wing it in the middle of the Southern Ocean when you're in a crisis. So prepare for it and really think about it. And believe me, this works. We recently did the Melbourne to Hobart yacht race, and I remember this vividly. In the final safety briefing, I said, okay, if everything goes to shit and something goes wrong, here's where I would like everybody to be, and this is what I want them all to be doing. And interestingly, we got nailed by 45 knots. We weren't expecting it. We got something jammed. We couldn't get the reef in. We started losing our main. It was all horribly wrong. And everybody went to where they were supposed to be, and we could problem solve, work as a team, all the right information and all the right decision making. And it was exactly as if we'd practiced it. So that's my recommendation. We train the team how to support each other, and we prepare for the worst.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today and being part of Resilience at Sea. I'm so honoured that you've come on the show, and I really look forward to working with you. And for anyone that's interested in more information, reach out. We'll put some details below. And we look forward to training you all on the Resilience by Design course aimed at mariners and super yachts.
Fantastic. Thank you for the invitation to come on.
Thanks very much. All right, everyone. Thanks for a great session, and I look forward to speaking with you all soon. Stay in touch.